Okay, so welcome to this episode of Antinatalism around the world. So, this episode we are in Nigeria, and I am joined by Matthew Nimite and Daniel Tambi, and they are both from and in Nigeria, and I can't wait to get into it. But before we get into Nigeria itself, I wanted to ask you guys how you first came across antinatalism, and just any sort of background on yourselves you guys want to give. So I'll hand over to Matthew first, if you go first, Matthew.
Okay, I got onto antinatalism relatively early. For me, as a kid, I was something of a voracious reader. Outside my academic books proper, I used to read a lot. I was always thirsty for knowledge, and so I consumed a lot of material, literary material, and back then when there was no internet, so that helped a lot to give me an awareness of the world, in terms of like contemporary, how it was at the time, and historically, and all of that shaped my worldview. That I read about things that have happened in this world, like terrible events that have wiped
Mm.
out tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people, the world wars, Pompeii, the bubonic plague, and all of that. And I just, wonder, like, wow, this world is really messed up, and how will people have the effrontery to bring new life into a world like this? So that was such thoughts crystallized at around age 10 thereabouts, but I never knew there was a word for it until about a decade or so ago. Let's say 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, where I first came across the word antinatalism on the internet.
Mm.
And everything that was being said about antinatalism is what I already had as my worldview, and so it just resonated with me at once. And so I've been an antinatalist since childhood, but I now even knew that there was a word for it a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I've got to say you were a much more advanced 10-year-old than I was. When I was 10 years old, I was not doing anything within the same ballpark as you. Cool, Daniel. How did you first come across antinatalism?
Okay, my encounter with the thing is kind of similar with what Matthew described. But for me, growing up as a child, I had like a pretty sheltered life, meaning I didn't like interact with like much of the outside world until like maybe let's say like my early teens. So like my life was pretty sheltered. So I used to have, or growing up as a kid, like I used to notice how like privileged and like fortunate I was. In comparison to other kids around me. So I kind of figured out, hey, like, you know, look at what everyone else is going through, but look at how fortunate I am. So I kind of figured out that like it must really suck to be you know. Even though now that I'm much older and then like I'm really touching up on like real life stuff and it's really like hitting home. And it has me questioning like a lot of decisions that, people have made on my behalf. So yeah, I definitely, I definitely think that's how I came in contact with anti-intellectualism. I've always been like a neurodivergent person, so I wouldn't really classify myself as like someone who thinks along like the established norms. Yeah, I mean just books, mostly books and the internet. There are times when I've like struggled with like soft deletion thoughts. So I mean, I don't want to like come off as a dark person, but then there are times when I've struggled with like self deletion thoughts. So like every time those come up, I'm always asking myself, okay, what is this? Why am I here? Like all these like very existential questions. So
And so how? So, Matthew, you said that you came across the term antinatalism online. Daniel, I don't know where you specifically heard the term, but like, do either of you guys remember exactly where you first came across the term? Was it like, was it in a video, or I don't know, Daniel, if you found it in a book or something like that? Do either of you remember?
Yeah, in my own instance, I came across that term when I first encountered some antinatalist Facebook groups and pages, and
Right.
Commentators material was being reviewed, and it was mentioned in the article. So it was Facebook on the internet for me.
Mm.
For me, like how I encountered the word, the actual word, was mostly through looking at YouTube. My the way I actually stumbled on the word is kind of funny because I was looking for one thing and then I found, something completely different. So, it was actually online. So I
Right.
saw them mentioning stuff about like David Benetta, which is like canon at this point. Better not to have been, right? And then there was like
Yes,
books.
better never to be.
Exactly. And then there was stuff like from like Dostoevsky and all these really Emil Sharon. I think yeah, that's another one, Emil
Yeah.
Sharon. So I think that's Emil Sharon. Am I right?
Yeah.
I don't think of is
Yeah.
that
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
between
Yeah.
Yes, ML.
okay. So essentially that's how I like stumbled on the word though. But then just when I was looking for one thing on YouTube and then I found this other thing that kinda like aligned with what it says I was actually thinking at the time. So yeah.
So, both of you guys are obviously antinatalists in Nigeria, but are you aware of a sort of like other antinatalists in Nigeria? Is there sort of, do you have any gauge on if there are, many other antinatalists in Nigeria? Is there any form of community at all? What is it like there?
In my own, from my own observation, I just know only a handful of antinatalists strewn across the country. It's a very niche population. I just know about
Mm.
less than 10 antinatalists across the entire country.
Mm.
For me, living in like the northern parts of Nigeria, I don't know where Matthew stays, but like he probably stays like I don't know where
I'm
your
in the
ends is,
River
but
State.
okay. But for me here in the northern parts, I've never like you get me like never ever come across anyone that kind of thinks that way. So it kind of makes it a bit lonely, you know. That's why we kind of have like the internet to kind of meet people like you, Matthew, and Lawrence. So
Mm.
it's kind of sad. I would like when you bring up the topic, people are kind of I don't know what's the word like. People just kind of they've been programmed to think a certain way, from the upbringing and such. So I would like even though like myself, I've been brought up that certain way, but it kind of takes like a lot of mental strength to kind of break through that. So
Mm.
yeah, in terms of meeting anybody else, I would say over here in my part of Nigeria, I would say like I'm probably like the only one who probably thinks like that. So I don't know about what Matthew said. 10 other people. It would be really, really nice to meet one of them. I hope like there are ladies in the group because
So, like, Matthew, you were saying, there are like a few antinatalists across the country. Is there any are these just like isolated individuals, or is there any form of community at all, like a WhatsApp community or a Facebook group, or any way that these antinatalists can discuss with each other and maybe, like Daniel said, have a meetup at some point?
Yeah, I am a member of just one Nigerian antinatalist Facebook group, and that's just about all the community I have here in Nigeria.
Okay.
And it's a relatively
Well,
small
what
group.
what what we can yeah. What we can do is, if you are able to, after we finish recording, send me the link, then I can send it to Daniel in case Daniel doesn't have it, and also put it in the description of the video. So if there's any other Nigerian antinatalists watching this video, they can find that group. So Daniel mentioned about how, it's quite like isolating, often talking about antinatalism in Nigeria. What is
Exactly.
what is it like in Nigeria to discuss controversial issues like antinatalism? What's the culture like in Nigeria? I have a very like basic knowledge because I live in London, so there's obviously a large immigrant population, and there's obviously like a Nigerian population in London. And I grew up, with some Nigerians, so I have a vague sort of, knowledge of the culture there, but very limited. So what is the culture like there for discussing controversial ideas like this?
Okay, for antinatalism specifically, most of the time I bring up the topic for discussion among peers, among people I meet from all walks of life. There's a general and antagonistic rebuttal. Like it's essentially a taboo topic here because everyone from all walks
Mm,
of life, from different religions, the three the two major religions here, Christianity, Islam, the traditionalists, the different ethnic groups, everybody is just considering it as a taboo topic. Like, it's such a natural thing to do. The gods of our religions admonish us to procreate. So, I mean, what the heck are you saying
mm,
that we should not procreate on ethical and moral grounds? Like, can you be more ethical and moral than God Himself? So
mm,
it's always met with that antagonism. So I usually limit my discussions. I try as much as I can to be an activist for antinatalism, but even then, it's within limits because for the most part, it's a taboo topic. Most people
yeah,
just cannot resonate with it. It's like an alien idea to them, very alien, and they are not ready
yeah,
to even consider it one bit.
Again, coming from like the northern part of Nigeria, over here is like very like ultra conservative, So these are not necessarily topics that people even want to even touch with like a 40-foot pole. You get me? So
yeah,
people don't even try to speak about it, like much less, you know, um, talk about it in public. So I mean, there are times when I would even like growing up as a child after stumbling on these, ideologies. Like I know there's like definitely a point in time where like I've almost been committed to like a rehab. Yeah, that's true. Sad but true.
oh wow,
Yeah. I mean, initially people think you kind of like do drugs in order to stumble on these sort of ideas. So, I mean,
mm,
true. I've almost been committed to like a rehab at some point until I was like medically examined, and then they figured out that oh, this one is not necessarily crazy though, but then it's just that like he just thinks a bit differently than what's obtainable. So that's what kind of saved me though. But I promise you
mm,
that people will definitely try to treat you a certain way if they know you think like that. So for me, it's not something I publicize. It's not something I preach out loud. For my own safety. So I mean, if I can find people that actually do think that way, and then we do like talk, and then oh, the conversation actually leads in that direction, I'll be like, fine, great. But it's not something I publicize because it's kind of like a safety concern. You don't need people showing up at your house by
mm.
like 1 a.m. with pitchforks and torches.
It sounded like talking about antinatalism in Nigeria, it can come with almost like the threat of physical violence. Is that like a very real
Um, I wouldn't
possibility?
say I wouldn't say no. I wouldn't say up to physical, but just like verbal hostility and like you being ostracized and seen as a
Right.
like some sort of societal outcast, but not
Yeah.
necessarily physical. Nobody
Yeah.
wants to fight you for not having kids, but you'll be seen as weird,
Yeah.
like some alien from Alpha Centauri rather than Earth. So yeah,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
so
I mean, but for me, there has been times when, like, me talking about like contrary opinions and beliefs actually, it almost did result in physical violence. Almost did. But then, at the end of the
Right.
day, it just takes like what's the word now? It takes being cunning. Cunning is the word. being can actually like evade those sorts of
Okay.
situations.
Oh,
So
okay.
yeah, so when you notice like the conversation gets a bit heated, you just make a light-hearted joke and then you guys laugh about it, but then you know that you drop points.
Uh, okay. And particularly where you are, your part of the country. I'm in the south, that is more liberal. Your part is the north, that is not so liberal. So there's a greater likelihood of it getting to the point of a physical altercation. Yeah, over there
Right. Yeah,
compared to
yeah,
the
yeah.
southern part of the country. Yeah.
I also wanted to ask about sort of politics in Nigeria. Is there anything in the politics in Nigeria that's relevant to antinatalism or procreation at all? Like, topics like abortion or adoption, things like this. Is there anything in politics in Nigeria that is relevant to this?
To the best of my knowledge, there's not, like, let's say in the U.S., for instance, topics like Roe versus Wade will come in as
Mm.
a topic for political debate, and in Nigeria, we don't have such issues about reproductive rights and the like. It's usually borders on economic security slash insecurity and other issues. It's it's never, to the best of my knowledge, there's never been an instance where such topics were part of the topics being discussed on the political level.
Right.
Yeah.
So I wanted to also ask about the media in Nigeria. Are you aware of like antinatalism being mentioned at all in the media, like TV, newspaper, radio, anything like that?
Not at all. Not at all. The only instance of media coverage I saw were the links you sent.
Right.
Yeah.
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 So yeah. So for the benefit of people watching, I'll put the links in the description. But
Okay.
there seems to be this Nigerian radio station. Were you aware of the radio station before? Is it a well-known one or is it a sort of local one?
Yeah, it's actually a local one right here in River State where I reside.
Oh, cool. Okay, cool. And have you ever listened into it? Is it something you'd call in about?
No, I haven't. I haven't listened before I got the link from you.
Yeah. So basically, just for the benefit of people listening, like I said, I'll put the link in the description. But it seems that I don't know how the radio station works, but there are two clips from this radio station that are with the same woman. So this particular presenter is
Yeah.
obviously aware of this topic and interested in it, and she does like call-ins about it. I can't remember if she really shares her own opinion, but she does call-ins about antinatalism, and there are some people that have called in,
Yeah.
which is quite interesting. Daniel, we've got you back. Matthew and I were talking about whether antinatalism has ever been discussed in the media, like radio, newspapers, TV. Apart from those radio clips I sent you guys, are you aware of it being mentioned anywhere else?
To the best of my knowledge, those are the only clips I've seen in terms of being talked about like in mainstream media. That's like on probably the radio or
Yeah,
something like that. So the presenter you actually
yeah,
mentioned, though, she clearly knows about the topic, though. But then
yeah,
I don't think she necessarily like again, like I said, I don't think like she necessarily fully understands what it is. Because from the way she attacks, let me not say attacks, but from the way she takes on the topic, it's more like looking or making a mockery of the ideology from what I think.
right,
Exactly, because the way she does calling sessions about okay, Antinatalists, like look at these freaky or these freaks, like why would anyone think
yeah,
like that, you know? So it's kind of like a thing for radio callers to just call in and make fun of, but then she doesn't really necessarily appreciate like the nuances of the ideology.
yeah,
So that's
Yeah.
just my
Okay. Just to add a bit to what Daniel just said. Funny enough, besides others who are not necessarily antinatalists having like vague notions of what antinatalism really is. I think the misconception about what antinatalism really is extends beyond such folk right into even some people who claim to be antinatalists. They don't really get what antinatalism is about. Some of
Yeah.
them think it's about the environment, it's about overpopulation, leaving the core issue about the ethics and morality of procreation. Because in the real sense, antinatalism is purely a moral and ethical position. It has nothing to do with overpopulation. Even if there were 10 people on the entire planet having all this land mass, all the 7 continents and oceans to themselves, they'll still be suffering. So it's an intrinsic, it's a built-in component of human existence that has absolutely nothing to do with the numbers of people, and it's not about the environment. You understand? Even
Yeah.
if this was a lush paradise, a sort of Garden of Eden like paradise all over the earth, you still had no way. Yeah, you still had no way of getting consent from the potential person you were bringing into it. Because for me, and I think what the true definition of antinatalism is, necessity is more important than goodness. Now, let's just imagine this was an earthly paradise, like I said. That is good. It can be defined as good, but there's something that even goes beyond, that is more important than goodness, and that's necessity. Fine, it's good, but is it necessary? And the answer is no. So even good things can exist, and they are not necessary. So even if life was all fun and games, it still would not be necessary. I mean, there's nothing about life that makes it necessary. Like if there's really a God somewhere, and I could have the privilege of having a discussion with him, and maybe even restricted to only one question, I'll ask, like, why did you have to create life? It was absolutely necessary. I mean, like, were you bored? Do you watch us like some Netflix or Amazon Prime for your entertainment?
Yeah.
Why on earth did you create life? It's absolutely unnecessary. So that is the core of my, at least for me, and what I would consider other true antinatalists. It's the core of the philosophy. It's not about the environment or population, overpopulation. It's about the fact that you cannot, it's nigh on impossible to have consent from a potential sentient being. Whether you are creating that sentient being in an earthly paradise or in a hellscape proper like the earth is, it absolutely doesn't. You could not have consent. And so it is, because it can be a paradise, and yet the person says, to hell with your paradise, I don't want to be any part of it. Like this Christian heaven, for instance. Why it's not a selling point for me as far as Christianity is concerned. Like, now, if you promise me a heaven after this, in the afterlife, I mean, day one, we'll sing hallelujah, amen, lick some deities backside. Day 1 million, we'll do it again. Day 1 trillion, I mean, it will get boring at some time. So it's not even a selling point for me, the so-called Christian paradise. Daniel, sorry, I know I'm sounding funny, but
No, it's not
that's
funny. It's like
just
these are things you
okay.
definitely have to wrestle with. So I get it.
Yeah,
I completely
so
get it.
necessity. I mean, none of this is necessary. There's nobody on Mars. There's no human on Mars. There's no human on Jupiter, and nobody on Earth is crying a river or losing sleep because of that. Because there are no
Yeah.
people on Mars or Jupiter. I mean, if the Earth has such a scenario, and people say it's a tragedy, it's a tragedy for who exactly? Who will it be tragic for if there's nobody on Earth? So that's the core of antinatalism, and I find many self-professed antinatalists still don't understand what antinatalism is really about. So
Yeah.
that's why I wouldn't blame that lady who, for all intents and purposes, looks like a natalist. I wouldn't blame her, because some antinatalists don't even get what antinatalism is all about.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, if there's a paradise on earth, that's good for the people that are here, but it's not a reason to create new people, like you said.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I wanted to move on to like potential antinatalist or sort of relevant things said by people in Nigeria, because the first thing I wanted to note is there was a YouTube channel by a woman who sometimes talks about antinatalism, that I sent to you guys, and I think you said, I didn't know if she was Nigerian or not, but yeah, exactly, one of the links, which again, yeah, so she is Nigerian.
Yes,
Yeah, yeah.
definitely Nigeria.
Yeah. Yeah. So, is she, Matthew, is she one of the people that you're aware of as an antinatalist in Nigeria, or was she a new person and you didn't know her?
No, she was a new person that I got to know about through you, through the link.
Right. Okay, that's cool. Well, it would be amazing, if at some point, I don't know her, I don't know where she is in the country, but maybe she was able to link up with you guys or some of the other antinatalists in Nigeria. So a few other people I wanted to cover, and Daniel, you're going to have to lead the way on this because I don't know who any of these people are. But in my emails with you, and then I shared it in the WhatsApp with Matthew as well,
Yeah.
you mentioned a few people who I don't think any of them are antinatalist, but you said that they speak about things that are kind of like maybe
Overlapping.
somewhat relevant. Yeah. So who are these people and what sort of stuff do they talk about?
They're just like philosophers, people who've done like a great deal of thinking from Nigeria. They're not necessarily like anti-natalists, but then they're they're like their line of thought kind of like overlaps sometimes in terms of like ethical stances. I think they are
Yeah.
yeah, I think they overlap a bit with anti-natalism, such as people like, let's say, Wole Shunka, who's like a very vibrant like activist when it comes to like issues of population and other stuff like that. So these are guys who really have talked about like a lot of stuff, even though they necessarily don't get the concept of anti-natalism. But then I feel like if they had just scratched a bit like deeper, they probably would have stumbled upon the idea in and of itself. So yeah,
Mm.
people such as Chino Achebe, um, Professor Wole Soyinka, what's her name, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, all of these people, very prolific thinkers we have here in Nigeria. So, but then again, I suspect they probably may have already stumbled upon the ideas, but then I don't know whether they're not courageous enough to speak up over us because of like their stance and how we
Mm.
might proceed. Matthew, I feel like you want to say something.
Yeah. My my lips
Yeah.
are itching to say something.
Literally, I
You
can
know.
literally see you. Yeah,
You okay? The energy was all
yeah,
over. So
yeah.
I really don't. Such guys you mentioned, they are all over the planet. We have ours here in Nigeria. They're all over the world. Such people who they are not necessarily antinatalists, but they have this utopian vision of that we can someday achieve, maybe by their social activism, by making people more aware. So
Mm.
I really do not have any value for such efforts because they, you know what? Let me. There's a typical scenario I usually use to explain antinatalism. Imagine a boarding house, and let's say it was started by a gas fire in the kitchen, and there's a gas supply utility line that feeds gas into the house, and the house is now on fire, and there's a valve outside the house where this fire can just be addressed by switching off the valve. So now
Mm.
imagine the residents of the house, rather than going to switch off to turn off the valve, they keep looking for maybe water, wet blankets, and everything else how to remedy the fire, except remedying it from the source, which is the valve. So
Mm.
all these efforts to me are exercises in futility because the utopian society they are trying to accomplish on earth will never come about. And
Mm.
people have, for instance, let me tell you guys something about my views about technology because it's relevant in this discourse. I'm by the you may not know, I'm something of a geek. You understand? I'm a real technophile. I love tech
Yeah.
because I'm from a tech background, kind of. But in all of this, as fascinating as my PlayStation 5 or my Android phone is, or whatever, I am never um, in that deceit that someday our technologies will give us a utopian society on earth. You know why? Because technology uh, technologies from the dawn, from inception till date, they've always had this twofold side where they solve some set of problems and then create another set of problems.
Mm.
You understand? For instance, a couple of years, let's say a couple of decades ago, we didn't have the internet, we didn't have computers that do all these marvelous things they do today. And maybe bank transactions and the like, where international trade was quite clumsy. Nowadays, you could send a couple of bitcoins to a friend across the globe in a matter of seconds. But it comes with its own attendant problems. In this same area of convenience, this is the same area where, I mean, if you have your life savings in one account, a good enough hacker somewhere in the world can just wipe it off in one fell swoop in a second. So technologies bring about some solutions and some problems as well. So there's never going to be a transhumanist or technological utopia someday on the planet. So I am not. It's very clear to me that we will never have a utopia on Earth from technology or from anything else. So the best thing to do is to turn off that valve. Other efforts are essentially futile because the fire will keep burning until the valve is turned off.
Yeah, and like
And that valve
Peter
is
Vessel's.
antinatalism.
Yeah, exactly. And like Peter Vessel's app said, he said, bearing a child into this world is like carrying wood into a burning house, which is
Burning house,
goes
yeah.
along with your with
I
your
absolutely
analogy.
love that quote. Yeah.
Yeah. So these people that Daniel mentioned, are they generally sort of they're like social commentators? Are they sort of like more left wing, sort of progressive social commentators that criticize the social structure and stuff?
Exactly. They are social critics
Right. I mean,
that are vying for a better society.
yeah. So even though these people may not be antinatalist, although, we maybe don't know because we maybe don't know their views, they could be people that are sort of more sympathetic than the average person, because I don't know these people. You guys will be more understanding of who they are, but they seem like the sort of people who'd be more attuned to human suffering, right?
Yes, they are, but they are still breeders. They still have kids.
Right.
Yeah, all of them.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Well, then, yeah. I mean, it makes it less likely that there'll be antinatalists then. Yeah.
In other words, they are still feeding the very flame they are complaining about.
Those were all the questions that I had written out. Is there anything else you guys wanted to touch on? Anything at all that's relevant to antinatalism in Nigeria that we haven't covered so far?
No, I mean we pretty much.
For me, I think we've touched pretty much everything.
Cool. Okay. Nice one. So one thing I wanted to say to round off is, so you mentioned already, Matthew, that there is that Facebook group about, for Nigerian antinatalists. So if there are any Nigerian antinatalists watching, that link will be in the description. If you guys have any progress or success in connecting antinatalists in Nigeria up, or even having a meetup of some sort, definitely let me know about it, and I can put the details in the description as well, even retrospectively. So that'd be amazing. But do you guys have anything else you wanted to say before we wrap up?
I just want to express my gratitude for having us.
Yeah. No, thank you so much for coming on, Daniel.
Yeah, essentially, I just want to thank you for being so kind as to entertain and be patient for like a terrible internet connection. Thank you so much.
No, it's all good.
Yeah.
Well, one thing I'll say is, doing a series like Antinatalism around the world.
I wonder how
sorry,
the editing
go
will
on,
be for you. It will be a ton of work.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's gonna be a
with
mess.
these glitches in the internet, it will be a ton of work to edit. So you might.
Well, I've got my work
you might
cut
go
out
way
for me.
beyond the next week you projected.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, one thing I was going to say was, doing a series like Antinatalism around the world, you get used to dealing with different internet connections, shall we say, of people in different countries. But it's no problem at all. I mean, I can edit. People who are watching this now, they will, see the edited version. Hopefully, it's a bit cleaner than it is now. Just to finally say, so I think, Daniel, I don't know if you've done anything online at all to do with antinatalism. I know Matthew's done a few other interviews, which I'll link in the description. Is there anything, any sort of thing you want to direct people towards that you've done or anything? Or is there nothing that you want to direct them towards?
No, I don't really want to direct anybody to nowhere because, I wouldn't really call myself like an activist or someone who advocates for the thing. So it's not something I publicly, put out there. So yeah, I don't really have anything to point people to. So yeah.
Cool. Okay, no worries. But thank you both for coming on, being my guest today, and sharing about antinatalism in Nigeria.